Hey everybody, it's Bust with Battles with Bust number 484, and today we're doing battle with Leona Daybreak. And so, at the start of Fate's voyage onward, the Daybreak deck got a lot of new tools in the kit, and hopes were high for the level of strength. And so it got the card advantage unit at the 2-cost space in the Defenders of the Sun Disk. It got the interactive style unit, which the deck was really lacking in the 4-mana space with General of the Dunes, and then it got the big finisher in the Herald of Celestial Convergence. But as the format kind of evolved and came together, you quickly kind of found out that when you played your Herald of Celestial Convergence on turn 8, you activated a Daybreak, so you would say like have a Leona with a stun, and you got to draw a card off of Ravoon, and you got to give all of your units +2/+2. While that naturally sounds pretty big and spectacular, when your opponent just followed up with Warden of the Tribes and gave all of their units +6/+6, it looked very small what you were doing in actuality. And so this deck got pushed by the wayside. It couldn't handle those late games to where your opponent just played Warden of the Tribes and put an additional 60 stats on the board. But with the release of the balance patch here within the past week, the nerf to Warden of the Tribes, the kind of pushing out of the Warden in the format, opens up this space to where Leona can potentially come in and shine. The other big aspect coming out of the balance patch is going to be the update to Exhaust. Exhaust used to be at focus speed, so you could play it right before your attack and your opponent couldn't respond, but it wasn't ever useful as a combat trick. You couldn't cast it in the middle of combat. Now that Exhaust has been changed to burst speed, it gives this deck something that it's really looking for in some combat interactivity, while also giving the deck some unit-based interactivity, so it's doing a little bit more than just hoping our big units can overcome our opponent's slightly smaller units. And so, if you aren't familiar with the Daybreak deck, the big things that it has going for it is in the early game, we're going to be trying to play a Daybreak unit on every turn of the game to try and get our Leona flipped as fast as possible. As soon as Leona flips, whenever we get a Daybreak, she's going to come out, get barrier for herself, and then use that solar flare to be stunning the opposing unit. So the idea that we're going to have is we get to shut down the opponent's strongest unit with Leona's stun ability. She can then challenge down typically their second best unit, and then we're left with all of our really strong bros and ladies hanging out ready for combat while our opponent's board has been severely weakened. That's the kind of early mid-game plan. The problem in days past has been that outside of Leona, you couldn't particularly interact with what your opponent was doing. So if they had 2 units on the board, you might be able to get a stun onto one or something, but you couldn't really stop the other one, and that would leave you in these spots to where we're both just building up boards back and forth, but we're never actually taking advantage of that. What we're hoping to have happen these days is, in addition to Leona being able to provide those challenges, we now have General of the Dunes passing out vulnerables, and that Exhaust that we mentioned, able to pick and choose some of the combats that we're trying to get into. Last but not least, this deck has a couple of angles in terms of closing out the game. First and foremost, there's the Winding Light, the ability to just boost all of the units on the board. Typically, that's enough to finish off the game, but in the event that it's not, the Herald of Celestial Convergence does activate the Winding Light again, and that should certainly be enough to finish off the game. And so it's very important to kind of note the way that the Herald of Celestial Convergence works, that first it has the play ability. And so regardless of if you're going to be making a Daybreak or a Nightfall, that play ability is going to happen, which activates all of your other units' Daybreak and Nightfall effects, and then the remainder of the effects happen separately. So if it's your Daybreak card for the turn, the Herald gets overwhelmed. If it's your Nightfall card for the turn, so you've already played one card before you drop the Herald, then it's going to catch Spell Shield. But regardless of whether or not the Herald is getting overwhelmed or Spell Shield, the rest of your unit's abilities should be activating. And then again, ideally, that's enough to close out the game with things like Leona stunning a unit, Solarius Sunhawk stunning a unit, Twilight Protector giving all of our units +1/+1, and then that big boy again and the Winding Light giving all of our units +2/+1 and overwhelm. And so that's it. That's the deck we're going to be doing battle with today. Before we dive in, I do want to mention the Champion Draft Series again. Later today, in about an hour or so, if you watch my videos as they come out, our draft phase of the Champion Draft Series will be happening. And so we'll be drafting this week, and then the matches will be starting next week. And so, as you can see right now, the current video on here is that prettiest face in the land of Runeterra. You got FTP Bust as the the newest interview video out there. Go ahead and check that one out if you would like. And then again, I'll have the draft up later. And then I feel like a few of the people have at least mentioned they're going to be streaming their drafts, so you may already be familiar with what's happened. I think Majin Bay said he was going to stream. I think Cephalopod was going to stream. I think Sir Termund is going to stream, and so a lot of that will be out there. But the day later, as we like to put it out, we'll have our draft up and running here within about an hour or so for you. And then if you're wanting to follow along with the Champion Draft Series, you can go down into the description here. We'll have the link to this YouTube page along with their Twitter page. And so before we dive into battles, we got all that stuff out of the way. You all know what we have to do. We have to go and pay that pay-to-win price, and we are going to boost up the General of the Dunes. And what a life he has lived. He comes down, he makes something interesting for the Daybreak decks, he makes something interesting for the Elites decks. How does the General of the Dunes get used in actuality? As an activator for Warden of the Tribes. What a wonderful way for this card to be welcomed into Runeterra. I feel like I'm pretty spot on in terms of what I feel like needed to happen to Warden of the Tribes. I still feel like it should have a menagerie or a zookeeper or whatever, some kind of keyword that gets attached to Nico. So Nico says that you can only play like cats and dogs and birds and elniks or whatever. There's like 6 or 7 subtypes that she can activate and use. And then I think Glacial Saurion needs to behold a menagerie or whatever, however that should be pronounced. And then the likes of Warden of the Tribes he gives the +1/+1 for each of the menagerie, zookeeper, animal friends cards that you've actually played up to that point. And so that was my stance, my take. I knew that it couldn't immediately happen, but ideally for the future, I think something like that could work out. But back into our battles here, we're up against Shen Jarvan with a copy of Set in it. We have a reasonable enough early game start with the Duskbringer into the Defenders of the Sun Disk, and then we'll take a mulligan to look for something a little bit more mid-game focused, since we kind of have the early game covered with the Duskbringer into the Defender, along with the Exhaust potentially on turn 3. Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. Poor Warden of the Tribes. As the Champion Draft Series approaches, that was one of the strategies I was thinking of taking, is just drafting a bunch of Freylord champions and looking to play triple Warden of the Tribes. But with his nerf up to 9, I don't feel particularly good about that. But that was something I was looking to do. But it sucks so much though that like. My opinion on Warden of the Tribes is it was completely overpowered, but, I do like having those very interactive kind of unit-based stuff. There was a lot of ways to kind of come down and interact with Warden of the Tribes in the sense that you could play like Ruination or Buried in Ice or kill the opposing units. It wasn't just like playing a game against Karma to where she just comes down and super pops off on the board and you can't really do anything about it. And so I feel like it was a bit of a letdown to have things happen that way. But as this game progresses, things are going quite poorly here. The opponent has the full kind of pop-off board. We can't really do anything about it. We're just going to have to kind of face this and hope that a couple of the hooks go our way. It's either he can't attack with the Caretaker or, he has to kind of save it for later. But very kind of disastrous round for us. This is what I was talking about. If you watched our previous video, I was getting a little overzealous in terms of trying to attack down a lot of the opposing Shen Jarvan board. And this space right here is kind of what I was mentioning in that game, as to where it's very important to be able to come in and remove a lot of these units from the board. If you just let them just build up this gigantic board to where they have 2 Kanaku students now, and then the Greenglade Caretaker, and as soon as he plays a barrier, the Shen's gonna flip. Like, he's really popped off in this space. And the point I was trying to make in those previous games is it's pretty important to be able to clear some of this stuff out, but we're not going to be quite able to do that here. I think we have to get our Leona into combat, and then we're just going to have to try and stall out and see if we can't get a big board that has get a big board that has overwhelms attached to it. But reasonable enough start here. We'll see how this pans out. We're going to keep all of his barrier stuff at home. I feel like with this style of attack, you know, if he has a barrier and activates all of his units in the back line, we're just kind of hosed as it is. But with the attack like this, he should only really have one barrier in here. So we should get the Broadwing off the board, or we should get the Shen off the board. And then I definitely don't want to be combating those barrier bros in the back line. Just no real way to take those down. Alright, so again, pretty bad, pretty dangerous for us. We can prevent a lot of this damage, but he's definitely looking stronger than us here. But at the end of the day, with this board, at least we're only taking 3. Guess we're taking 6, right? The Shen barrier bonus gets to spread out across the board. But ideally, we'll get a big recovery on this next turn. He doesn't have the boat down, so the Kanaku student doesn't have double strike yet. So maybe we'll be able to completely refill the board and then get some good hooks in next turn.
Our sun will not set today.
I am the bulwark against darkness.
All right, Leona, ready to party. This is going to be bad, isn't it? He's got... Oh, he's single combats onto Ravun. Interesting. Well, we'll take the protection while we can. And it's not a particularly hook-friendly round next turn in the sense that, you know, as soon as he has a barrier, all of his units are just going to grow in stats, and so... you know, we're really only looking to get a singular hook into Shen next turn.
Discipline and conviction.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and add in the soldier. We have to be able to block. You know, hopefully we've got him worn down enough at this point to where we can really kind of come in and interact and maybe take this Shen off of the board. But my hopes aren't. I don't feel super strong about this. Kind of want to save the Sunhawk for next turn. There's the potential we can get a stun with it. Probably not going to happen, but there's a little potential there.
Stand and fight.
Scary stuff, though. He had the actual nut draw coming out of Shen Jarvan with this, with the double student caretaker Shen, and so curious to see what we can pull off.
Want a piece of me? Line starts here.
How do we feel about this set? Like, I just don't think we have the time to play the Herald next turn. I think we're just kind of stuck passing. And then we'll just have to kind of wait and see. Are we just dead if we don't play a unit now? We do have Hush, right? So we can Hush something like the Caretaker to prevent a bunch of damage. But as it stands, he doesn't have any ways to gain barrier. I think we're still stuck just putting the Sunhawk on the board. We might find a space to where we just burst out Heaven's Align, get the stun, and then don't have to worry as much, but of course. Of course, why wouldn't you just draw the Shen right off the top? Okay. Well done, my dude. Let's see. That's just going to end up doing it. I mean, I guess we could try adding the Herald, but we kind of need him next turn if we're ever going to actually win this game. So I'm leaning towards like hushing set. Well, we have to do it like this. We have to Heaven's Align first. This is going to go on the stack with the Stellar Flare. And now that we have the Daybreak activated, we can hush set so that he doesn't get the Challenger and the abilities that go along with it. And with him hushed, we can just take the damage. Well, that just doesn't work. Okay, GG. But I'm not trying to make that sound like it's a spectacular match for us, but the opponent had the literal nut draw there, and there wasn't too much we could do about it in the early game. But that is the kind of big selling point to this kind of updated version that gets to play the better quality exhausts. You got to see what they could do there, and that's the kind of exact problem this deck has historically run into, in the sense that we can't come in and like force combats on people. And so it's very easy for that Shen opponent to just be like, okay, well, I'm just going to sit and not do anything this game, right? I'm just going to sit here and build up this board, and eventually I'll just get to kind of crash in with barriers because I know that you can't really interact with me or present enough damage. So it's typically a pretty tough match. But all right, into the next one. Up against Lurk, everyone's favorite deck for some reason. It was wild to me. If you go and look at Runeterra.ar to take a peek at the meta report, it was like Pike got nerfed and then the play rate went up. And so, fucking people. Fucking people. All right, let's see what we run into here. Did he get to ship back a Rek'Sai? Nope. That's pretty decent for us. So we'll have to see if we can't start to grind this down a little bit. Just getting these slightly bad units on board, but the slightly bad units are capable of trading with stuff like Sharkling. And then we can build up to something like this Moonlit Affliction, which should let us really hammer at the Lurk if we get to take away their stat bonuses. Okay, happy enough to trade in this spot. If he wants to come at us, this is fine. Let's hang on to the mana. I don't think keeping our small unit on board is that big of a deal. Interesting. I'm curious if this is an open from the opponent next turn. That seems kind of bad. Like, the thing I was worried about in this space was him playing a whatever the free attack unit's called. All right. Just have to take it. This is not a particularly strong set of Lurk units. Andy just missed his Lurk. That's what you get for playing these stupid cards. You just bring it upon yourself.
Daylight breaks on the battlefield.
Leona's ready to party, though. When was the last time you ever felt bad for a Lurk opponent? Never? You're right. The answer, the proper answer to the last time you felt bad is never. But let's go ahead and get this Leona involved in combat. The opponent's board sucks. Like, there is a chance that she gets hit by a Pike or something, but I don't think I'm ultimately too worried about that. It's going to take a lot of investment to get this Leona off the board. And then if he doesn't make that investment, we just end up winning. We just straight up win the game. And so, kind of is what it is. Oof. So how are things going for everyone in life? Have you spent any time following Taylor Swift at the Chiefs games? It's wild to me how quickly Travis Kelce is catapulted to the forefront of the nation. It's like you realize that Taylor Swift's a big deal, but like it's not as apparent until you see how like tangentially attached she is to everything else. Like I don't know who these people were that she's dated in the past. Like I guess I've heard of the Jonas Brother. Didn't she, think she dated a Jonas Brother for a while? You know, strap in. This is what we're talking about today. But it never, like anyone else that's been in my kind of like sphere of attention paying, that she's had a relationship with, to where they're just like the forefront of national media. And then as you watch football, yesterday was Sunday game day, and just loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of Travis Kelce commercials all over the place now. It's just crazy seeing the change. Let's see. He hit his Lurk, but it wasn't a Rek'Sai, so we get to protect our Leona. Now we can come in and just block this stuff. The game should be over at this point. Very tough to recover from, even if he has, say, like a Ruthless Predator onto the Zerzerath. We're still what I would feel to be fairly far ahead. But now that we get the Ravun Leona combo up and running, we're just going to start to run away with this game. You know what's more interesting than playing against Lurk? Talking about Taylor Swift. I feel like anyone in the world can really can agree with that. I think he might have rage quit after that attack, but I think it's a fairly spot on analysis. just much more interesting. All right, can we just win the game here? We're going to drop in the Sun Guardian. It's going to bring the stun onto Zerzerath. All of our abilities activate. Then we can play Twilight Protector, stun whatever his next unit is, and then assuming he adds another play after that, we can try and Morning Light it down. The Morning Light giving all of our units +1/+1. If we copy the effect on the Twilight Protector, it gives all of our Daybreaks another +1/+1. Then we'll get a couple more activations on the Sun Guardian. And so we're getting pretty close to 16. I'm not going to do the math, but I'm pretty certain we're there even without Leona being close enough. What's this? He's at Lurk 2. So he's only going to be dealing 3 damage to Ravun. Alright. Let's get involved. What a dumb card. Is there going to be a Pike number 2 coming down on the board? Why not have a second death from below? But no, the actual sports I wanted to spend some time talking about today was the David Beckham documentary on Netflix was spectacular. I watched that over the course of the past week. Very, very interesting life that the man lived, and it was just like I find it so easy to kind of just like relate to some of these sports ball players. It's like I know we're not playing the same game, but there's a lot of parallels between the work and the effort that goes into playing a professional sport, and the work and the effort that goes into playing competitive children's card games. And so it's kind of interesting seeing the work that he goes through. But I can't imagine like having to go through that lifestyle stuff with him and Posh Spice and just be the forefront of like the paparazzi running around. And like it's just so tough for me to imagine that that's like a thing, and people like threatening his kids and stuff, and the insanity that follows around with professional soccer or football if you're a non-American. if you're out there playing European football, you know. But it's just insane. But it's always crazy seeing him turn up. Dude's a fucking nerd. That's one of the things that you'll tend to find with like really serious athletes, is the sense that there was always that kind of like jock guy in high school that was big and a dick to everybody, but like that guy didn't make it anywhere. That guy's lucky to be bagging groceries down at the local Walmart. But like the people that really like fought hard and worked at it and tried to be strong and compelling at their game of choice. God, fucking cats. They're just tend to just be gigantic nerds. And that's what David Beckham really kind of like struck me as. It's like, yeah, he's you know, major celebrity, and he's married to a Spice Girl and everything, but at the end of the day, the dude's a fucking nerd. It's awesome. So it was pretty interesting. And then, like, I never really realized how good he actually was, and what a big deal it was for him to leave Europe and come over to the Americas and play. Like, I don't know how much money those dudes make, but I got to assume it's like less than they would make in America. And, you know, to see him kind of like leave the competitive aspects behind to come in and play with the weaker folks, but just catch the big paycheck. It's weird to see how that's shown sometimes. But nonetheless, I'm losing focus. Let's jump back in against old Davebo here, playing the Darkness deck. We're not going to have the speed we want to protect our Sunlit Guardian, which is a bit of a bummer, right? The Darkness is going to deal 3 damage, but we can still take this Senna off of the board. And so I'm going to go ahead and drop the Sunburst, and then we can start in next turn with the likes of our Leona. This is also kind of nice in a little bit of a sense, and it just gives us a way to spend a ton of mana. Since otherwise we're in this spot to where nothing's really happening with our board. You know, we're just trying to add 1 Daybreak unit, but it's only a 2-drop, and then the remainder of our hand is kind of stuck. Where are we at? My system's getting all fucked up here. I got a cat running around trying to hit all my cables and stuff, and I can't tell what's happening. I know she messed up my sound. It seems like the game got messed up as well. Oh shit, we just passed on turn 6. That was what just happened. Okay. That's on me. Getting it was like the cat's down here fucking with my cables, and then I saw the screen kind of flicker, and I just completely lost track of what happening. I didn't realize that it was actually our action here. So sometimes you just skip a turn, you know. It's not that bad. It's not that big of a deal. Maybe we're just out here dropping the next level mind games on them. See, I got you good. I got you good with the mind games. Alright, well, this Leona's about to get zinged. There's not going to be anything we can really do about it, but
Night flowers upon my blade.
I just kind of assumed that she was going to get hit with a vengeance, but we might have the chance to catch up. No. Oh, yeah, the 2 damage darkness. Okay. But we can still get a pretty big turn on this upcoming turn. We can add the Twilight Protector, boost all of our Daybreaks, and then use the Dusk Petal to actually get the Winding Light on board. It's a pretty big attack. It's not going to be enough to be lethal, but ideally he's going to have to at least come in and try and make a block with Vhagar. If he wants to play like the 4/5 lifesteal unit here, we have a chance to get bigger than it as well. So we'll see how this shakes down.
Will shape death as easily as clay.
Her flowers bring the moonlight with them.
The damage is coming in. We're gonna have to exhaust down the Vhagar here. He just doesn't have. We don't have enough damage to really force him into blocking, right? It's like he can put the Acolyte in front of Winding Light. He can put the Sentinel in front of another unit to cancel the 4 damage from the Dustbringer, and that really only leaves us dealing like 4 or 5 damage. And so, gotta try and get this Vhagar off of the board.
It's our time.
Everybody else is still welcome to attack, though. Let's protect our Winding Light, since we're not going to be getting the kill this turn. If we pick up the Herald of Celestial Convergence, we still want this Winding Light running around. Much more important than having a rando like Solari Soldier on the board.
What are you made of?
Come on, kitty. Oh my gosh, she's just being annoying. Oh man. Here we go. This is what the world wants to see. Say, what up everybody? It's Pepper. She's being a distracting shit, but let's see if we can't get our way out of this now. It's gonna be a tough recovery. Skipping that turn in the middle of the game did not really help matters. Alright, GG. Cat jumped up here and just like wiped boogers on me. Gotta appreciate that. It's like a distinct difference between the nose just being wet and boogers. A bunch of boogers and cat hair on me now. The things we must fight through. But yeah, I'm not certain we would have been able to, overcome within that game if we hadn't just completely skipped our 6th turn. But we would have definitely been in a much better position. That's a very strong spot for the opponent to just take a 3-bank and not do anything and then get the initiative on the next turn. And so, it would have definitely... I was expecting to have like Leona just get popped by Vengeance. I didn't have big expectations for her, but that's such a big difference to where you play Leona and then your opponent vengeances her and doesn't get to bank the 3 mana into the next turn, compared to what we did. So, it kind of is what it is. But here, let's get rid of the Pale Cascade. I want to find a little bit more of an early game unit. If we had another 2-drop to go with it, we could have considered holding on to the Pale Cascade. Getting up to 3/3 against Darius Gnar can be quite good, but not quite where we're at. Defender of the Sun Disc was a perfect draw. Surprised this guy's playing Darius Gnar. I played against this guy one day at the gym. He was playing Lurk, and I 5-0'd him, like right in a row. I just beat Lurk 5 times in a row against this guy. And then, like, for the remainder of the season, every time I played against him, he was just playing Lurk. And so I assume that was all that he ever plays, is just coming down playing Lurk. But it's very surprising to see the Darius Gnar come down. I guess the Pike nerf had an effect, at least on one person. But here, I think we're stuck adding the Twilight Protector. It's not particularly ideal. But, like, we can't have this... Oh, fucking cat. Now she's hooked on the cord. Oh, is this really what people try and deal with as they're out here playing games? fucking cats? Oh my god. Alright. But no, this is fine. There's not a ton that we could really do in this space. Now we at least have a reasonable attack back. And we can start from here. Just letting the Iron Ballista get the best of us wasn't going to cut it for the turn. Now we're kind of stuck having to attack. If he plays Gnar, we can't do anything about it. And so I'll trade any of these units for combat tricks, whatever opponent wants to do. People keep making shitty blocks. They must not be familiar with what the Herald of Celestial Convergence actually does, because these blocks we're seeing today are terrible. You have to remember, right? We have the way to come in and activate all of our other Daybreaks again. And this is like multiple times today that people have been taking away our weaker units to where the actual strongest thing we have is the Twilight Protector, boosting all of our Daybreak units again if the Herald is on the board.
Fight or die.
Alright, so what's the worst that could happen here? He can't Bone Club us anymore. He doesn't have the mana, doesn't have any bigger units. He can add another like 3/2. I think we can probably get Ravoon in and threaten some combats here. Like, this is one of these decks to where they do play stuff like decisive maneuvers. There is a definite possibility that he can take the Ravoon off the board, but this is just safe. This is an Elixir of Iron or something. I'm surprised he didn't attack with both units. Sure. Alright, just got to build up a little bit more. That was a big hit with Ravoon as well, hitting the Solari Sunforger, letting us come in and get not only just a very meaty unit on the board, but also get the lifesteal out of it. So let's pull in the Iron Ballista. I'm not going to attack with Ravoon, right? What we're going to do is we're going to play the Winding Light next turn. 2 turns from now, we're going to add in the Herald and try and get the kill that way. So here, we want to just hook in the Iron Ballista, I think. Only dealing 4 damage, it doesn't super matter, but it's worth noting that if you hook the Ruthless Raider, you're only going to gain 4. Either way, it would take us to 20, but getting to take his highest attack unit off the board feels kind of nice. And then a no play? Wow. Wow. Gotta like that. GG. Alright. Victory unlocked. I knew we could do it. I knew we had it in us. On to the next one. Maybe. Okay, let's try that. That's a bug that's been kind of popping up recently, is to where you get stuck on that screen. I'm a huge fan of the addition of the new ending screen to where you can look at the opponent's deck and stuff, but I have noticed this happening on occasion to where you just get stuck. You can't do anything about it. So, nonetheless, up against Teemo Caitlyn Freylord, I assume this is a Puffcaps deck. I'm not certain what the Freylord piece is for. Seems like we should know. This has been a thing in the past, I think, but it's slipping my brain piece. Now here, there is some reason to actually add that Solari Soldier on the first turn. We have the double Leonas, so getting her to flip as fast as possible would be kind of nice, but we don't have any of the curve to kind of ensure that happens, so we could take it a little bit slower with the Soldier. God, do we ever exhaust this? It's such a high potential combat trick with the exhaust now. It's such a different feeling now that we're able to use the exhaust in a defensive measure, right? Taking this Caitlyn down to a 1-3. If we blocked her with the 3-4, then we'd be able to survive most of the combat tricks, right? So let's say that he has if we say that he has a Piltover Peacemaker or a Mystic Shot, right? She no longer just wins that combat. So very big deal being able to play these things. But whew, still getting back in the mix here. I still feel kind of rusty. I've been playing more and more and more over the course of the past few days. It's weird what taking 10 days off from the game will will do. It wasn't like a complete 10 days taken off, but it's definitely been a lot less play than I'm used to, and I definitely feel it. And so I'm hoping we can get reasonably caught up by the time the draft league really kicks off. I feel at least good about the strategy. That was one of the things I did get to do at work over the past week. You know, you're sitting there in a meeting and stuff, and you gotta have something to think about, and so you just think about your draft strategy for this upcoming event, and did quite a bit of that. But it's still feel a little rusty in terms of everything else that we're doing out here. But with this, let's just continue to press on. He's not actually doing anything strong. If we lose any of our cards here, it's not horrible. But, I mean, Leona is, losable at this point in the sense that we have the second Leona in hand. So I think this is all well and good. Let's just keep the Sun Guardian at home. No reason to trade it off as we're building up to a Winding Light turn. And then we'll see if he's got to have a Mystic Shot or something at some point to take these Leonas off the board.
One step ahead.
Not a huge fan of taking damage against this deck. Like, I kind of want to just block the Chump Wump. Like here. And then we'll see what we can do next turn. It's like we're kind of stuck in the spot to where if we want to Nightfall the Winding Light, we have to do it off of the Leona Morning Light. And it's just not a particularly safe way to go about stuff. But I think as the world famously says, I think it just is what it is, and that's the way we have to do it. So I'm going to add the Protector first, give our units that little bit of health. We're going to follow up with the Solari Priestess. Well, we only need a 2-bank into next turn, right? It's going to be turn 8. So we can play the Defender into Defender. And then go from there.
Bask in the light's radiance.
All right. Moonlit Affliction's always kind of interesting, but I think we still want to go for this bigger stat plan. So I'm going to activate the effect on Twilight Protector. A little dangerous, but I mean, he hasn't played any removal spells up to this point. Like, I'm not certain how to read into that. Right? Like, he's had ample opportunity to play a Mystic Shot or to play a Piltover Peacemaker in the midst of these combats, just hasn't done it. And so I gotta feel like it's at least kind of safe trying to activate off the bird here. But wouldn't have felt good if he did have the removal. Hasn't even activated a trap this game. What a bunch of nonsense. Alright, so I don't think we're going to be able to lethal this turn. It's very easy for him to just have big units and stuff, but we're going to annihilate his board and then be pretty close to finishing it off on the following turn. I am still going to just go ahead and take the Caitlyn away. I can definitely see some argument in bringing down like Puffcat Peddler. I feel like Puffcat Peddler is more along the lines of units that actually matter. But it feels like the Caitlyn's the only way that we're ever just going to die, right? So if he activates like 8 traps and then Caitlyn gets a strike in, we do have the Silence in hand to try and counter some of that, but it still feels pretty dangerous to me. We're 1 short now. Nope. Oh, he's got a blocker in the back line. Yeah, we're 1 short. All right. Drop some puff caps in. Sure thing. And you're going to go and Sump Monument. That's the kind of shit I'm hoping to see today. And the Sump Monument. What a dumb card. This is a deck where I've been looking to fit in some of the explorers. It's such a tough space to where you really need, holy fuck, you just hit 5? It's such a tough space to where you really need to be hitting on like your Daybreaks and having everything fall in the right order. So things can definitely go wrong. But I really like that lifesteal guy so much, especially in Targon, with so many different ways to boost your attack. It was so odd. We took like 5 puff caps off of 1 draw, and we're at like 1 damage a turn of them. Oh boy, it's gonna be one of those games, isn't it? We are taking so much damage off of these. That's insane.
Glorious light rains down.
Insane. And so, how do we want to handle this next turn? We have the Nightfall off, but it's like I don't want to Nightfall the Pale Cascade, so I'm looking at this next turn and I want to just play Pale Cascade into Moonlit Affliction. And so, as it stands, we're just kind of like done playing cards at this point. We don't want to draw anything. The Golden Sister was something I was kind of initially drawn to, but her lifesteal's not going to be relevant. We're either going to attack and win, or he's going to apparently hit like 8 puff caps, even though he should only be about a damage per.
Strike while the planets align.
And we'll just stick in Ravoon.
Blessed daylight.
Can't imagine that he's going to make an attack, so we'll just go ahead and drop him in. Alright, well fellas, I guess we should squeeze those cheeks. It's not something I particularly thought was going to be necessary, but what do I know? Alright, let's see how dumb this gets. Squeeze them. I hope y'all are squeezing. Maximal gluteal activation. You gotta get those strikes in. Mystic Shot and an Insider Knowledge. Okay, it should be pretty safe. -1. 4 traps. Okay, GG. Whew. Alrighty, let's get ourselves one more battle in. We'll call it a day. That takes a lot out of you when you gotta when you gotta fight through like that. Like I typically against that deck take the stance of where I just like to prevent every single point of damage possible, because you typically just run into like RNG mode, and especially you can see in that game too where we were kind of like running out of stuff to do at the end of the game, just in the sense that we had a full board and it was kind of tough to upgrade units and everything. And so just kind of throwing the units away isn't that big of a deal, but all right though. So up against Janna Bard, definitely hanging on to the Sunhawk. I kind of like hanging on to Leona, but she's probably just a little bit too slow here. Gotta get on board early against this thing. Like, I don't worry completely about what this deck is able to do, but if they present you with one of those draws to where they have like multiple copies of the cheap Janna units on turn 5, then you really find yourself in a bind, and so it's nice to at least have a bit of width. Now, the way I'm looking at this, I want to kind of save the Solari Sunhawk for next turn. And so if we get to Sunhawk onto Acorn, that would feel pretty good. Any trade here, I'm completely fine with taking. That's not a big deal. And then we'll see where we can move from there. I can't get it. Now, we still have a decision to make with the Sunburst, right? Next turn's going to be his Janna turn, and so if we play the Sunhawk here, we'll still have the 4 mana next turn to play the Sunburst. We do fall behind with the Sun Guardian, but I think getting Janna off of the board is probably just a little bit more important. So we can swing. It's probably not going to block, and then, oh, what do I know? He is going to block. But I suspect now if Janna comes in, we have the Sunburst. If she doesn't, if he plays some other, unit like Bard, then we can play the Sun Guardian. We only missed out on one bonus there. An interesting point here as well as we roll into this turn, right? If we wanted to Winding Light, we could double Dusk Petal and then drop the Winding Light to get it down. Not particularly important here, but worth noting you can do that. Get the Herald down cheaper as well next turn if we want. Get him down for the 6 mana price point, but I feel like we've got a bit of time here.
Dawn has arrived. Behold the sun's holy light.
Rip Leona. And that was going to be tempting as well, just coming in and dropping. It was like the more I thought about it, I was like, I don't know. We could just kind of take that flip with the Leona, get her really up and running. But, eh. How do we feel here? I do think I just want to drop the Winding Light. How's this going to play out? Next turn we'll have 8 mana in total, so we wouldn't be able to Sunburst and General, but I think that's okay. I mean, the downside with the Winding Lights, it doesn't give us a lot this turn. Let's just do this. Let's add the General. Can hook in Bird, still have a decent attack. And then next turn we can look to play the Winding Light. 2 turns from now we can get the Herald in.
Do the kids still doing surf back in Shurima?
Wait, you? Oh, I love that for you.
Away with you.
It's like I'm kind of counting on this heal being good on the next turn, right? This does open us up to our units getting popped by Mystic Shots and stuff, but I think it's okay. It's pretty tough for him to present like a real compelling attack this turn. Like it does suck against this deck taking a bunch of damage because they do have a lot of burn in it, but my space against these Janna-based decks tends to be 7, and so many of the Janna decks have moved away from playing a lot of burn, like, and so I used to worry about like Mystic Shot, and then the 3 damage 2 to face thing. That would be 6. So if you're at 7, you felt pretty safe, but I don't feel like it's that big of a deal anymore. Alright, Janna comes in. A little late, though. A little late. Gotta feel good about these Heralds now.
Storm unrelenting.
Alright, combat time. Let's get in there, squad.
Lift us up upon your might.
It's gonna be a good hush onto this Cloudwinder. He's got the big stats from the chimes. I think we have the lethal as it is, but
My tempest shields.
getting that hush for an extra 4 damage could be a pretty big deal.
My wind is at your back.
Going for a Bard flip. I guess you just have to draw some cards at some point anyways if you don't have anything to do.
My tempest shields us.
Looks like a lethal to me.
You shall not assail them.
Move him around. Check every combo. Say, oh, bust, you zinged me. You zinged me good.
My tempest shields us.
We just dropped a Shen emote yet? You say, I appreciate the due diligence, my friend, but I think this one is done. All right, GG. Not a bad set of battles. We can pull this up and talk about it a little bit more. And so I feel like that game against Shen Jarvan really kind of illustrated the problems this deck ran into in the previous format, right? To where you can get into these boards to where, you know, we have like one unit that can attack, opponent just kind of says herder, okay, whatever. And then you just stare at each other back and forth. And then on turn 8, they would play Warden of the Tribes. And your play in Herald of the Celestial Convergence was not nearly as strong as their play in Warden of the Tribes. And so, this deck really got shut down by that. And then it still had, a fairly evenish matchup against the likes of Janna and Nyla, which, as the state kind of runs right now, there's not a ton of Janna and Nyla running around. I still think it's the best deck in the format, but I guess people are tired of playing it already, so you don't nearly see it as much. But this deck, it's kind of interesting in the space that, if you talk about a deck like Ashe LeBlanc, it's just complete dog shit against the early end of the meta, right? The really aggressive decks, and then it's dog shit against the stuff at the top end, the control decks of the format it can't really beat. It's out there being super, super strong against the middle part of the meta, the mid-rangey decks, to where it's able to say, like, flash freeze their big unit, put your big unit in front of their second biggest unit, and then you just start to develop a board from there. That's a lot of what these Leona decks are looking to do, in the sense that the mid-game kind of space, you tend to really just be able to outdo and overwhelm everyone. But the top end space is not good. Now, the place where Leona has a little bit of help is she is much stronger against the early game decks, and you can really kind of tune your deck to be good against the early game stuff. You can come out here and do stuff, say like, okay, well, Nyla Janna is really presenting a problem. I can now start to play things like Solari Shieldbreaker, to where you have that 3/6 on occasion, and you can have some ways to get bigger units on board and try and shut down the smaller plays from your opponents. Like, one of the big ways that you had to say combat pirates was that kind of draw, to where you would go Solari Soldier into Solari Shieldbreaker into Sun Guardian. If they aren't getting wider than you, then you just completely shut down all of their offense, and you snowball the game from there. And so this deck does have a lot of power in that sense. Do I feel like it's a strong deck in this current meta? That's where stuff really starts to get kind of shaky, right? I've never felt like the Winding Light is really doing enough in these games, and that just doesn't feel like a good space to be in, right? When you're playing the Winding Light and it doesn't just immediately win you the game, that's kind of rough. Like, having your game plan be, I'm going to play the Winding Light, and then next turn I'm going to have a Herald, and through the usage of the Winding Light twice, that's going to be enough to win the game. Like, I'm not the hugest fan of being stuck in that space. And so it just feels like the deck is like a twinge, just like a little bit too weak. Like, I love a lot of the angles that this can take, especially now that it's getting access to things like General of the Dunes and being able to spread out exhausts. And if your opponent's playing a game to where they have a bunch of 3/2s and 3/3s, and you have your 3/4 Sun Guardian along with your 4/4 General of the Dunes, and you're able to really dictate those combats, you can come in and snowball the board. The problem to me is it's just like, with Leona now being at 5 to flip, you don't have that kind of powerhouse mid-game to late-game play that just seals the deal. It feels like it's just too easy for the opposing decks to kind of claw back into the game, and this deck starts to fall a little bit short. And so I'm not certain with the answer. And so, like, the things I kind of like to cycle through, can you climb the ladder with this? Absolutely. You should be able to hit Masters with this deck at this stage of the season. I don't think that's a problem. Is this like the optimal ladder deck? Probably not, but the format's so varied, you can probably have some success with it. And then, is this a good best of 3 deck? And I think that's where it starts to get a little bit interesting, especially if we're going to, kind of land in a meta to where people aren't able to play multiple Warden of the Tribes decks. They might only have like one big top end style of deck, and this deck has the tools to really kind of jump in that space and ban out that one deck, and then have 2 good matchups left over. And so, we'll continue to think about it. There's definitely a lot of tweaks you can make to this deck as well. If you're wanting to make it better against aggro decks, you can add in like those shield breakers, like we were saying. You can even look towards things like the lifesteal unit in the mid game. If you're looking to be good against the control decks, if you want to be the control against the mid-rangey decks, you can come in and look to start adding invoke cards to your deck. You have the 3-cost Daybreak thing that invokes a 4, 5, or a 6. You have like a lot of options in terms of tuning with this deck, is what makes me feel like it does have quite a bit of potential in best of 3. It's just in terms of the ladder, I don't think I can get really excited about it. But nonetheless, good set of games. I had fun with that. I hope you did too, because that is going to do it for us today. So I hope everyone enjoyed the video. Hope you maybe learned a thing or two along the way, and you had a good time watching. So this is Bustin' We. Thank you for being here.